you guys were not. You were in. Actually, you were in our preseason.
I was in Portland as well.
I want to cover playoff hockey in Vancouver. I want the fans to enjoy and experience playoff hockey in Vancouver. I want the Canucks to win a Stanley Cup for this city. And looking at Raptors Twitter right now, a fade for Cade. I feel like a lot of them would love to see him there. I mean, I'm not advocating for that, but I mean, I know that's big on Raptors Twitter minds these days.
LA gave one out to Jared Goff, and they've already moved on.
Correct.
They didn't think that could work for them.
Okay, sports fans, it's time for the Unnamed Sports Show. Here's your host, Joshua Griffith.
Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Sports Show. I am, of course, your host, Joshua Griffith. This is a presentation of the Sports Talk Line Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. Today is episode 57 and my first weekend special, as I wasn't able to line up my guest at the end of the week, but it's a fantastic guest. So today on the show, I'm going to be joined by the one and only, the boy genius, writer for The Athletic, Mr. Harman Dayal. Of course, before we get to my chat with Harman, we need to take care of the housekeeping. So subscribe to the Sports Talk Line Network down at the bottom. Make sure you give this video a like, comment along, let me know what you think. This is a great chat that we had, just about 30 minutes. So it's going to be about 32, 33 minutes of your time. So really hope that you guys enjoyed. We talked all things the Vancouver Canucks offseason, some of the most important decisions that the management team needs to make, the importance of cap space. Talked about some of Harman's great articles that came out for The Athletic, looking at maybe a third line center for the Vancouver Canucks, a little bit more Canucks talk. And then I got him to break down some advanced analytics as if I was a dinosaur, because I kind of am a dinosaur when it comes to advanced analytics. So this was such a fantastic chat. Like I said, just about 30 minutes with Mr. Harman Dayal of The Athletic. So I hope you guys enjoy. All right. So I'm so thrilled to be joined now on the Unnamed Sports Show by writer at The Athletic, the boy genius, the one and only Harman Dayal. Harman, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Asking all my guests, we're still almost there, but not quite yet. Are you staying safe and healthy during these times?
Absolutely. It's especially now that it's kind of summer and just being able to, go outside a little bit. It's I think that's definitely helped in terms of the sanity after everything we've gone through. And things are slowly starting to open up again. So definitely healthy, definitely happy.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm a little bit embarrassed. This is episode 57, and I just reached out to you a little while ago to have you on my show, and I noticed, I was like, geez, why haven't I had Harman on? I was like, oh, he must not have got back to me yet. No, that was just my bad. So thank you so much for getting back to me, coming on just right at the end of the NHL season, but the beginning of an exciting offseason.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge one for the Canucks. I mean, you look at the position they're in, and you're looking at a team that ultimately, within 2 years, you really have to put together, I think, a high-end product if you want to carry this project the right way forward. And the reason I say within 2 years is because that's when Bo Horvat and JT Miller are unrestricted free agents, and that's kind of the timeline of where things shift. And I don't necessarily mean that those guys are going to leave if things go awry, but if they do stay, they're going to be quite a bit more expensive than the contracts that they're on right now. And when you combine that with Brock Besser and the fact that he's going to need a new extension next offseason, and the extensions that Pettersson and Hughes are getting this offseason, all of a sudden your core is becoming exponentially more expensive than what they've cost the last year or two. So on that basis, it's kind of a transformative period for Vancouver's cap situation. And, obviously next offseason is when a lot of the inefficient deals come off the book. So that's kind of an opportunity where you look at the 2022-23 season, and this is one where we've talked about a lot. That's going to be an opportunity to go all in while some of your players, while Horvat and Miller are still on their team friendly contracts. And in having said that, this offseason kind of sets up the parameters for the next one, where a lot of the decisions the Canucks make in terms of potential buyouts, the players to target via trade or free agency, that's going to directly impact the level of flexibility they have moving forward. So definitely you're looking at a very high leverage next couple of years for this franchise, and one that could frankly be defining for what this team is able to accomplish with this core.
And obviously, as Canucks fans, we have to be looking down the line in a couple of years. As you said, some of the contracts get off the books, and as the Canucks are able to reduce some of these other contracts. But let's look at this offseason right now. Harman, what do you think is the most important thing that the Canucks will have to deal with this year? Not necessarily like a move, but whether it be the buyout window just opened, we have expansion draft protection lifts coming up, we have the expansion draft coming up, free agents, the draft. What do you think is going to be the most important thing that the Canucks need to focus on this offseason?
Well, I'm not sure if this directly answers your question, because it's more of like a general theme as opposed to one specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the central dilemma of this offseason is figuring out a way to significantly improve while not compromising your flexibility for next offseason. And that's such a delicate line to walk, because when you look at, let's talk about the buyouts, for example. I think Jake Vatanen is a fairly easy, straightforward one. There isn't much of a cap penalty on that for the year after. So, that's a no-brainer. But you look at someone like Braden Holtby, where if you buy him out now, yes, you're creating a lot of cap space for this offseason, but you're left with, I think it's a $1.7 million cap penalty or something along those lines for the 2022-23 season, which is, again, that's your all-in shot to actually build a real cup contender. Whereas you look at this offseason, realistically, the Canucks, they aren't going to be able to improve enough to get to that level. So it's almost a philosophical kind of dilemma, where it's like, how much do we prioritize trying to rapidly kind of do everything in our power to upgrade the team for next year without kind of, detrimentally impacting what we can do when we actually want to make a run at a Stanley Cup. And so, that applies to what the Canucks do via trade, right? And I think that's where I'd prefer that they keep the 9th overall pick. But again, how important is it for, management, who is under tremendous pressure and scrutiny? How important is it for them to make the playoffs? And, do they, see the possibility, do they like the idea of moving that pick for a forward who's maybe 24, 25 years old, who can help them now? That extends to some of the contracts they sign. Are they going to kind of play it prudent and, mostly target 1-year deals and emphasize volume in trying to, fix up their supporting cast? Or are they going to go out and, be and try and be more aggressive bidders and hand out a lot of terms? So it's, a lot of these kinds of debates, and we've heard Jim Benning, talk about being aggressive. I'm definitely going to be fascinated to look at what exactly that entails. And I think, ultimately that is the central dilemma, I guess, of this offseason, is how aggressive are you going to be?
This is an interesting offseason too, because it really comes down to, one of the notes I wrote down when you were just answering there was short-term answers versus long-term gain and long-term goals, right? I mean, if you're, one of the things that Canucks fans are always screaming for on both sides is, buy out these players, get them off our books. Then another thing they're screaming at right on the other end of the spectrum is, we still have Luongo on our contract. We still have to pay him. And I don't think that they kind of fully understand that some of these buyouts could possibly roll on to the next season. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Like, how important of a player is cap space? because it seems that like NHL teams don't value it as much as they should in the season nowadays, or you just watch Tampa do what they did, literally. Some might want to say manipulated in the camp, but I say just playing by the rules and knowing it better than anyone else.
Cap space is king in today's NHL, especially in a flat cap environment. I mean, here's the thing: if you have cap space, and this is why I think Seattle is in a position where, you know, I think they'll be better quicker than a lot of people imagine. I think it's why Vegas, you know, it's not the entire reason that they were, you know, dominant right off the hop. They were definitely gifted some players through expansion, you know, teams like Florida really helping them out. But
Yeah.
you know, cap space, you know, having that open balance sheet definitely is you know, one of the top you know, top components of building a contender. I mean, you look at any team around the league that's contending, you know, whether it's Vegas, whether it's you know, Tampa, we already mentioned, whether it's you know, Colorado hasn't quite gone there because they still have Makar on his ELC, but they're going to get there soon. You know, Toronto isn't exactly a contender, but you know, they're always juggling the cap line. You know, it's just many of you know, if you were to look at the top 10 teams in the NHL, most of them are doing this yearly cap dance. And so, you know, it is huge. And I think you know, especially again because of the flat cap world, I think being able to efficiently allocate capital and, you know, manage the cap, I think is the number one most valuable trait for a GM that's, you know, trying to build a cup contender. I don't mean, you know, if you're a rebuilding team like Detroit, obviously you need to, you know, get your core group of players first. But if you're a team like Vancouver and you have a lot of your core pieces already in place, then really it is all about managing the cap, because you look at especially non-star players who, you know, have money in term left in their contracts. You can acquire them for super cheap. I mean, Nate Schmidt hasn't worked out in Vancouver yet. But he was a top pairing caliber defenseman in Vegas. Canucks snagged him for a 3rd round pick. Yeah. Right. And that just tells you how much weight contracts have in today's NHL. I mean, you know, Victor Arvidsson, I think, went for a 2nd and 3rd round pick. You know, I think that was a relative bargain. And I think, you know, even in free agency, you're, you know, historically free agency has been such a landmine, but you look at kind of what happened last offseason and you had such a market squeeze, especially on the middle class, and it was definitely a buyer's market. And so I'd suspect that free agency is a buyer's market again. There probably aren't going to be as many landmines, and so for that reason, if you target the right middle class kind of players, free agency is now a way easier path to upgrading your roster compared to where it was before. And again, to do that, you need cap space. So, you know, cap space and flexibility is clearly king in today's NHL.
Yeah, it is, and it seems undervalued. I'm joined by Harman Dayal here on the Unnamed Sports Show. And you wrote a great piece for The Athletic, something that you know, maybe the Canucks should be targeting for a 3rd line center. Some of those middle 6 pieces you're talking about. It's really an intriguing list. I'm obviously not going to give it to all to the people because they'll have to go to The Athletic, get their subscription to check you out there. But, you know, some names like Ryan Getzlaf, Alex Kerfoot, you know, Ryan Donato, Nicholas Waugh. You know, if you could pick maybe just 1 or 2 names, because like I said, don't want to give your whole article out on my show. They gotta pay for that. And then also too, while we're on that, you can hit the subscribe button to the Sports Talk Line Network. But Harman, if you could give me a couple names, you know, out of that list that you gave that you think the Canucks should really focus on this offseason.
Yeah, you know, Nick Waugh from Vegas is really interesting. You know, he's a big kind of 6'4" centerman, right shot guy who I think has really good hands, underrated skill, can, make the odd finesse play in high traffic areas. His point totals definitely don't jump off the page. I think this was the first full NHL season he had. And so, he adds these, power forward qualities, but he, again, packages it, alongside underrated setup ability. So, he's a player that that I really like. And you look at his point production pace over the last couple of season and a half. He scored 5 and 5 points at a third line rate on a per hour basis. His two-way profile looks strong. And so he just looks to me, 24 years old. He's got offensive pedigree. He was the number 1 overall pick in the QMJHL many years ago. So he looks to me like a really quality breakout candidate. Now, obviously, because he's cheap, he's not going to be easy to pry away from Vegas. The thing about the Golden Knights is they do have Chandler Stevenson as their first line center, who's been a great fit alongside Pacioretty and Stone for all of last season. They've got William Karlsson, so they're set in terms of their top 6 centers. Part of it, I think, hinges on how do they feel about Cody Glass, right? Drafted right after Elias Pettersson, top prospect there. Is he ready to push for a full-time spot? And if so, then that's maybe a scenario where Wah could be a player that Vegas could listen on. I reached out to my athletic colleague Jesse Granger on Wah, and how amenable might Vegas be to listening on him. And they said he said that Vegas definitely wouldn't be eager to get rid of Wah, but they might be willing to listen. And so I think he's the kind of player where realistically to get him out of Vegas, you'd have to pay an above market value rate. But if you think there's untapped upside there, then definitely he could be worth targeting. Pierre Engvall out of Toronto, I think, is really interesting. Big, rangy, 6'5" centerman who can also play the wing. He's not going to produce a lot offensively. I think he had like 12 points in 43 games. But he is so good on the forecheck, so good at closing time and space defensively. He's a really fast player despite being so big, and he owns excellent defensive metrics. You look at the last 2 years of results for Leafs forwards, and he owns the lowest goals against rate. He just helps suppress high danger chances and helps keep the puck out of the back of the net, which is really important for a Canucks team that was one of the most permissive defensively in the National Hockey League last year. So it's not just about how much offensively a guy can produce. You look at Engvall, he is someone that I think Toronto is not going to be able to protect in the expansion draft. So perhaps an opportunity there where on that basis you could look to acquire him. And so those are kind of the couple that stick out to me. I mean, another one that I'd love that I included was, if the Canucks could find a way to carve out some cap space. I'm a really big fan of Mikael Granlund as well. So those are a few options there. And, it's definitely going to be tough to acquire a center. It's a lot harder to do that than acquire wingers. But ideally, the Canucks would find a way to kind of patch that up, because while JT Miller would be good in the 3C role, I ultimately think he's significantly better as a winger. And so, for the Canucks to maximize his value, I think it'd be great if they could find another player, another forward that can, give them the option of having another centerman for that 3C role.
Absolutely. No, and something that I really loved about that article too was that you had a nice mix of players that are going into, free agency, players that are still under contract that the Canucks could maybe make some moves to acquire. So it gave a lot of options. So again, if anyone hasn't checked that out, I implore you to do so. So Harman, I would imagine that you observed the NHL Stanley Cup Finals this year.
Yep.
Yeah. What did you make of it? What did you just make of the playoffs in general? Just, some general thoughts, anything that stood out to you in regards to the playoffs or the finals this year?
Yeah, I think, with Montreal, it's fascinating because, I had looked at them after they had beaten Winnipeg in the second round. And, I remember it was a Sekeres and Price hit where, we were, I think at the time, I can't remember if Vegas had already gone through at that point, but, Montreal was definitely among the Final Four. And I remember saying that I think Vegas is a much better stylistic matchup for Montreal than Colorado would be. And the reason I kind of gave was because Vegas has an anemic power play, and you looked at the trend of the teams that the Canadiens had beat, with the Leafs, with the Jets less so, but even theirs wasn't functioning at the highest clip. But they'd beaten teams by taking a strong special teams edge, and so that's where when I looked at the Canadiens moving on, I felt that their playoff run would last as long as they held the special teams advantage in a series. So they did that against Vegas. They beat them. I'm not saying that I predicted that they'd beat Vegas, but I definitely thought it'd be a much closer series than it would have been against Colorado. And then, but ultimately when they ran up against Tampa, and that Tampa power play was running at, I think, a historical conversion rate. Right then and there, I was like, I don't see this holding up. There's, Tampa's power play is just way too hot at this point. Doesn't really matter how well the Canadiens are killing. They're going to give Tampa power play opportunities, and Tampa's going to bury them. And once they lose that special teams advantage, I felt that their recipe to winning would kind of go downhill, and that's ultimately what kind of happened. But I think Tampa winning back to back, and I know people again have are a little bit upset at the whole Kucherov thing and some of the cap things that have gone on there, but ultimately I think it's good for the sport, right? You want teams around the league. It's such a copycat league, and I'd much rather prefer teams look at Tampa where look, the best team on paper doesn't always win the Stanley Cup, but we've, I think, seen that for 2 years in a row now. Maybe you could argue that Colorado was better on paper in the regular season, but Tampa was right there. And so I just think it's good for the game to have, GMs hopefully aspire to build a team like Tampa, because I think that would lead to much more exciting hockey, as opposed to, if some other team had won it, or if, Montreal had done so, because ultimately one of the biggest, issues I see with teams is they're too slow to recognize that it's time to rebuild. You look at the Canucks,
look at Arizona,
right?
Look at Arizona. Jeez, like they're
Arizona,
like a 20-year rebuild right now.
You look at San Jose, they don't realize that they have to rebuild as well. They're still, you listen to Doug Wilson, he's got some of the worst contracts in the league, and he's still talking about, oh, we like our core group of players who are going to contend. And it's just, I want, that's a fundamental, I think, mistake based off the premise of, well, if we just can get into the playoffs, anything can happen. And it's just like, that's only true to a certain extent. And I think it's good for the game that you have a true juggernaut like Tampa win, as a reminder of just exactly how difficult it is to assemble a cup winning roster.
Oh, Harman, I would absolutely agree. It's exciting to watch a team that's built properly that decides to do something. I mean, if I would have liked Tampa only more if they had have made an offer sheet last season. That's the only way I would have liked it more, because then they're really breaking all of the NHL norms. And something that you just mentioned is what the teams aren't doing is all of these analytic things and doing the deep dives and looking at more than just the on ice production or the old school style of hockey. So as someone who's absolutely loathed advanced analytics as I first got into this, but have now had to kind of adapt and figure things out. What kind of made you want to look at the NHL and hockey at more of a deeper dive than just a plus minus or goals for, goals against, assists kind of deal?
Well, for me, it's just about having as much information to inform your assessments and takes and opinions. It's Cam Robinson had a funny tweet. If you went to expect a home, you wouldn't just eyeball it, right? You would take everything you can into consideration. You wouldn't just kind of like walk through every room, glance at things, and be like, it looks pretty good. You'd do the full deep dive. You'd take into account every variable and consideration you can. And so that was a funny tweet by Cam that I thought was a funny analogy there. But in all seriousness, I think it is just about adding as much information as you can. And the reason I value this info is because it has a proven impact at the end of the day in helping predict future wins. And that's ultimately what it's about. This is proven. It's out on the internet with the proven statistical research. But when you look at the most common shot metrics, shot attempts, Corsi, whatever you want to call it, and then expected goals, both metrics are proven to be better at predicting future goals for and against. And this is actual goals for and against. I'm talking at the team level, right? Those metrics are better at predicting than past goals for and against. And so what I kind of mean by that is, if you had 41, if you split a season into two halves, first half, second half, first 41 games, you had access to just the regular goals for and against. You had the shot attempt differential, the expected goals. Those advanced statistics would generally, on average, not always, but on average, that's going to be better at predicting future wins, future goals for and against, than the past results that you've already seen in the wins and losses column. So that, to me, right there, just shows the fundamental value that's there. And the reason it's there is because ultimately, in this league, unless you're, there are very few players around the league that, can bend shooting percentages sustainably over a really long fixture. For the most part, 80 to 90% of players over the long run are going to shoot in a pretty narrow range in terms of shooting percentage. And so, off of that, assumption, at that point, what matters is, how many shots you get, shot quality. And so, that's just where, I place value on those numbers. And so it's, and ultimately it makes intuitive sense. I mean, the broadcast all the time talks about shots on goal and uses it as a proxy of, okay, if a team's really badly out shooting another team, well, that generally means they've had more chances maybe and more ozone time. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to win, but they've generally had the control of play. And 100% agree with that. But it's strange that when you kind of expand that premise to all shot attempts, then all of a sudden it becomes too advanced for people. Like you were referencing shots on goal, and saying, oh, well, Tampa's really outshot Montreal in this game. They've really had the control of play. 100% true. But now you go shot attempts or look at the specific results when one player's on the ice, and now all of a sudden, for some people, you have to throw it out the window. To me, it doesn't make logical sense. I'm not saying, again, analytics to me is only one part of the equation. There's always, things that, the numbers aren't going to pick up. And, the way I kind of look at it is, the analytics can tell you what's happened on the ice. It essentially gives you the results. Figuring out why those results are happening the way they are, and figuring out what your sort of takeaway or your opinion or whatever based off of those results is in large part informed based off of what you're seeing through your eyes. So I think it's definitely a collaboration, a marriage between watching the games and then using the numbers. And again, it's just about collecting and using as much information so that you are making informed assessments about players and teams.
And as someone, like I said, who just got into it last year, it has been extremely helpful in getting a broader view of things. Obviously, too, it's like with any statistics, there is a long-term range that needs to be observed, because if you look at something from maybe a 2-game sample size, well, you're not going to get a full picture.
Absolutely.
Which is hilarious, because some people like to do that. Well, in this 4-game series in the playoffs, how is the Corsi there? No, just okay. So, like I said, I'm a dinosaur. My dad, he's a huge hockey fan too. He makes sure to watch every one of my shows, I hope. So if you were to explain and try and use as little words as possible, can I throw out some of these advanced analytic terms and you can kind of explain them for a dinosaur?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So for us dinosaurs, Corsi.
Right. Okay. So, we talked about the shots on goal. Let's say Elias Pettersson. What you're doing is, how the broadcast always references shots on goal for a team. Now let's look at one player. When Elias Pettersson is on the ice, now instead of just all shots on goal, let's do all shot attempts. Who's getting more shot attempts? Is it Pettersson and his team when he's on the ice, or is it the other team? So it's just looking at what percentage of shot attempts they're getting. Obviously, and it's expressed as a percentage. So 50%, that means an even split. More than 50%, that means you're getting more shot attempts than the other team. Now, obviously, that doesn't specify where the shots are from. So, like any statistic, it can, you need to keep shot quality in mind, but that's what Corsi is.
Okay, another one too, which has an interesting Fenwick.
That is exact same thing, except we're only including the shots that were unblocked. So any shots that were blocked, excluded from the equation.
Okay. And then just one more, what is the difference between makes the difference between a scoring chance and a high danger scoring chance? Because this is one of the ones we're hearing now all the time is, they had 5 high danger scoring chances that period.
Yeah. A lot of it depends on, that can be subjective based off of, what service you're kind of looking at or what site. But generally, I think high danger would refer to the inner slot, chances from a really close proximity to the net. Scoring chances, meanwhile, I think would be kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen the diagram of the home plate.
Yes,
if not, you can kind of Google it, but it's kind of from the tops of the circle, it's top circle down. It's kind of like a home plate figure. So that's just a more a wider range of area to include what a scoring chance is.
Okay, fantastic. So I think that'll help me again, and then hopefully some of my viewers there who might not be more familiar with these advanced stats. I will let you get to it and enjoy things. I'm sure you're working on some stuff for the Athletic Canucks and NHL right now. If you'd like to let us know if you have anything coming out, or maybe just plug the site, feel free to do so right now.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for next week. My colleague Thomas Drance and I are dropping an anonymous NHL agents poll. We polled agents around the league on to predict Pettersson and Hughes's next contracts. So definitely
that'll be jeez.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to put together. So should be coming out next week, I believe. That should be a lot of fun. So definitely something for people to keep an eye on.
Did you get Dollywall cold calling for you?
No, that would have been fun. I mean, if Dhaliwal would have done it, he could have just done the entire thing in one sitting, just like gone through his like phone contacts book, just like one by one. But no, we tracked down the agents over the course of a week or so, and especially because it was anonymous, we were able to get really frank and honest opinions. So
That's
it was a
fantastic.
lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I'll be looking forward to when that drops. So again, Harman, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and hope you enjoy the off season. Look forward to all of the work coming out of the Athletic from you.
Thank you.
That's right. Lots of great Canucks chat today on the Unnamed Sports Show. Such a thrill to have Harman Dayal on. I do apologize to him because I don't know why I waited till episode 57 to have him on my show. Such a blast. I learned so much today. I hope that you guys did too. And now with the NHL Stanley Cup being handed out, Tampa Bay's won it for the second year in a row. I'm sure everyone knows that. We have some key dates coming around the corner in the NHL. So schedules are kind of starting to filter out. I'm sure people saw the Seattle Kraken have released their preseason schedule. They'll be playing the Vancouver Canucks at the beginning and at the end. The expansion draft is set for July 21st. The first round of the NHL draft is set for the 23rd, with the subsequent rounds following on the 24th. Free agency opens on the 28th. That's a big one. And then things kind of start getting back underway in mid to late September with training camps. So it won't be long for NHL fans. You won't have to wait, Canucks fans. And I'm sure, as you heard Harman say, there's going to be lots of news, and it's going to be a busy off season for Canucks. So I really hope that everyone enjoyed this conversation with Harman Dayal, boy genius from The Athletic. This has been the Unnamed Sports Show, a presentation of the Sports Talkline Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. I have been your host, Joshua Griffith. And as always, remember to love sports, all sports.